You really have to function as an entrepreneur in all of the areas of your life. All right, we're going to pick up on Carrie Ann's theme from this morning about the practicality of philosophy. We're very smart. We can think big picture, long range, future, past, integrated set of principles. In many cases, that's abstract. How do we tailor that and make it operational in our lives? And I want to use the theme of entrepreneurship and generalize it to an entrepreneurism as a lens for thinking about the meaning of life. So this is my theme, but I want to start by saying that obviously human beings have been around for tens of thousands, depending on which anthropologist you talk to, hundreds of thousands of years. And they face the challenge of making a living, surviving, and then hopefully thriving. But the last 0.1% of human existence has been extraordinary, and I want to make the claim that it has been revolutionary. And so all of the general lessons about living the best possible life, most of those will still hold true, but they will need special tweaking and in some cases special upgrading when we're thinking about the world that we are living in right now, and then especially for you younger people, the whole stretch of time that lies on before you. So it'll be my first claim, that we live in revolutionary times. What do I mean by that? Well, let me give you one chart, just one economic indicator. This is 2,000 years of human history along the bottom from year 1, 500,000 and so on. So modern times basically begin here. Columbus crossing the ocean, early days of scientific revolution, at least in Western history, Protestant Reformation and the battles over religion and so forth. Vertical, this is the entire world, the economic historians measuring how much stuff people are making on every year. So this then is to say, if you go 2,000 years ago, significantly less than $1 trillion is the total productivity of everybody on the world. It's not zero. Human beings are still living, but we would need a hugely different scale. If you had gone back 2,000 more years, then multiply that by 10, 20,000 years, multiply that by 10, 200,000 years. It's a flat line close to zero in terms of overall world productivity. Now, we jump 500 years, 1,000 years. I don't know if you can quite make it out, but something is starting to happen by the time we get to 1,500. There's actually an upward slope to the line that starts right in around here. And then we get serious increases here, 10%, 20%, 30%, and now we're into Industrial Revolution, the age of the Enlightenment. Once those Enlightenment ideas in politics, in economics, in religion, getting rid of slavery, the status of women, scientific revolution, industrial revolution, once all of that moves just out of being idea space and some initial experiments and becomes institutionalized in first Western culture and then around the world, this is what happens to our economic productivity. Unbelievable unleashing of productivity, such that we then in a very short period of time go up to 100 times the amount of productivity. Now, this is the world average. That means you have to take all of the countries that when we travel around to right now and we go there, we say, oh my gosh, these people are so poor. And we're shocked, especially if we come from Canada or the United States or some relatively prosperous country. If you were just to set out the 50% of the richest countries and the 50% of the poorest countries, just leave the poorest countries to the side, that vertical slope would be even more dramatic. And we would have to be like, I don't know how high this building goes up, but standing on the roof to indicate the data point for where we are. Now, if there's anything that counts as a revolution in human history, the unleashing of human productivity in a blink of a human history eye, the last couple of 100 years, counts as a revolution. And we're born into that culture. We're born into it. This is normal for us. But it's worth reflecting for those of us who are more intellectual, more big picture, more strategic, to be aware of that and to have some good worked out ideas about why that came into existence. And particularly if we want our kids and grandkids to be better off than we are, we want to continue this trajectory to figure out what ideas and what institutions made that possible so that we can pass that on and hopefully, of course, continue to improve. We can start parsing this out in various ways and come up with some explanatory things, and here are some of the big things along the way, some things that are positive, some things that are negative. So if we go back, for example, this is the fall of the Western Roman Empire anyway, and things enter into a much darker age, no progress, stasis, death rates are higher and so forth. And then the Black Death, Genghis Khan and his predations across Europe, pretty much all of Asia and into Eastern Europe as well. So all of the history is very interesting, and you can start to figure out what's the contribution of the science part, the engineering part, the fall of feudalist economic arrangements part, and so on. So the social scientists can have a lot of fun. And different of those factors come online at different points, but we want to have an overall picture if we possibly can. We see some serious declines at various points, wars, pandemics, right, that occur. So if we can figure out the problem of war, right, make it less severe or get rid of significant number of wars, that's going to be an improvement. If we can say, well, we just went through a pandemic, if we can actually learn some lessons from that and have that inform the next time it happens, because there will be a COVID-25, there will be a COVID-30 at some point in human history, so we're still going up the learning curve there. Poverty is the flip side of that. There was a version of this chart we saw a little bit earlier, but this is just basically my lifetime, or the old people in the room, their lifetime as well, in the relatively affluent second half of the 20th century. But even so, when we were growing up, there is so much poverty in the world. It's terrible, it's awful, we should do something about it. And as progressive Enlightenment people were still scandalized that the problem of poverty has not been solved, because we should be able to solve all problems. That's what we are. We're problem solvers. But at least in our lifetime, world poverty has gone from maybe 27% of the world living in what's defined as extreme poverty. If you keep that standard the same, that's down to approximately 5%, and it's continuing to decline in the last year. So we're making progress on that front as well. Now, that's a revolution as well. It's not just that so many people lived in poverty and now we have a small minority of people who are living in serious, serious poverty, but it's also that mindset change, because for almost all of human history, the idea that we don't have to be poor, nobody believed that. They thought maybe a few people would get lucky, right, be born into the right families, conquer the right people, and they could be rich for a little while. But it's just cyclical. Some people go up, some people go down, but the overall human average is going to remain the same. This is not a problem. The poor will always be with us. But we don't think that anymore, and that's a revolution in thinking. And once you think that a problem doesn't have to exist, then you start to think about doing things that you otherwise would not think about doing to solve the actual problem. And that's been a big part of us. But let me start to drill down a little more narrowly about some statistics that I think will be relevant to you younger people, particularly, you're from all over the world, but you're in the United States, and some of you will pursue your careers here in the United States. But also several of these trends are the same kinds of trends in other quickly developing parts of the world. Even though things have been very revolutionary over the course of the last 2 or 3 centuries, lots of evidence that the pace of those revolutions is accelerating as well. So here's a statistic from Stephen Rogers. He's a business professor at Harvard University. He's getting a little bit older now, but striking statistics. Say, all right, so I'm getting my education. I'm going to go out into the workforce. Chances are good I'm going to work for a big corporation because they are dominant in the business landscape and so forth. But just notice some statistics here. 1960s, 1 out of every 4 persons in the United States worked for a Fortune 500 company. I don't know if you know what the Fortune 500 is. Fortune is a business magazine, and what they do is they publish statistics on a regular basis, but they have a big annual issue where they list the 500 biggest corporations in the United States, all of the giants, and you would recognize those names. And then correlate statistics that you might be interested about those corporations, including how many people are working for them compared to family businesses, mid-sized corporations, entrepreneurial startups, how many people are unemployed, and so on. So you get the whole back here. But this is fascinating. So 25% of the American workforce is in one of the Fortune 500 companies in the 1960s. Today, right, this is a generation later, only 1 out of every 14 people work for these companies. Now that raises an interesting question because that's a generational shift and it's continuing. You take the top 500 companies and you count the ratio of people who are working in those companies to working various other kinds of jobs, and fewer are working in the top 500 corporations. So where are they working? Because the population is going up, right? And so what this then indicates is that more and more people are working in middle-sized businesses, small businesses, family businesses, entrepreneurial startups. So there's a shift away from the big, mature corporation where we've got all of the bureaucracy and procedures worked out. That's still absolutely important. That's a goal that many of the other businesses are striving for, to other parts of the economy, the business economy, where that's not happened yet. And it's different working in a large, mature, stable, somewhat bureaucratic corporation compared to working in other kinds of business. So if you start thinking about the likelihood of where I'm going to end up in my career, how you have to plan for thinking of working in one kind of business, a mature, stable, perhaps bureaucratic organization, compared to something else, the mindsets might have to be somewhat different there. So that's the striking statistic, and that's a trend worth thinking about. And my expectation is that this will carry on through your careers. Here's another fun one. Go ahead, Marcia.
What year was that data from?
This was from 2009 or 10, I want to say. Okay, so this is very fun, also from fun. So the top 10 corporations in America in the year 2000. Let's just read through the list. You'll recognize a lot of them. General Motors, Walmart, Exxon, Ford, General Electric, IBM, Citigroup, AT&T, Philip Morris. That's a tobacco, and Boeing Airlines. Okay. Now, fast forward 20 years. This is like basically your lifetime, right? And you look at who the top 10 are in year 2020. Walmart, Amazon, Apple, CVS Health, United Health Group, Berkshire Hathaway, McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, Alphabet, and Exxon. How many of the top companies from year 2000, basically around the time of your birth, are even in the top 10 anymore now? 2. That's to say 80% churn. 80% have fallen out of the top 10. Walmart went from second to first. Okay, that's still an amazing entrepreneurial story as Walmart's adapting to the new environments. And what's the other one? Exxon, yeah, went from third, barely hanging on in 10th place. Okay. So what this is to say is that there's a lot of churn, even among the big, established, large Fortune 500 companies. Companies that are in the list here disappear. And so many of these companies here basically didn't exist or were very young entrepreneurial startup companies when you guys were young startups, so to speak, in your own life. So growth and decline. So the idea then that I'm going to go and work maybe for a big corporation, everything's stable, is going to be, I can plan on being there for 4 decades until I retire, and they give me a nice gold watch and a going away party. That is a myth about the employment landscape. Now, this you might just say it's just 2 data points, but I don't have time for it. But I do have the slides for this. You go to 1980, 20 years before, it's the exact same thing. There's only 2 companies on this list here that were on the list in 1980. And the same thing, 1960, right, and so forth. Constant churn, right, and so on. And what that then means is if we project into the next 20 years, year 2040, what's that going to be? If that historical pattern continues, it means very likely that there are companies right now that somebody's just thinking about, or they've just started them up. And they're going to take off like a rocket, like Google took off, like Apple took off, like Amazon took off. And in year 2040, they're going to be among the top 10. And then when you guys are mid-career, those are then more likely to be the kinds of companies. But they don't exist yet. They're just startups. They're entrepreneurial things, right, and so on. Sorry? NVIDIA. Well, yeah, there we go. Yeah. I said, where did NVIDIA come from, right? Yeah. Well, obviously it was like 20 years in the making to become an overnight success, but, right, that's exactly the story, right? That will carry on. So, on top of that, continuing industrial revolution, continuing intellectual revolution. We're talking a lot about robotics. Now, the story of robotics is an old story. The robots are just machines that do various specialized kinds of functions, and industrial revolution with the steam engines and then the electrical revolutions and so forth, carrying on all of those. But if you think about how the work landscape is going to be transformed in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I chose this picture here because this is a car place. You know, remember Ford was on the list here. GM should be in there somewhere. Yeah, they were number one, so they make cars. But when I was a kid and you went into a car company, right, what you would see here is 40 or 50 guys on both sides doing all sorts of things. Those guys are gone. Right now there's 2 guys, right, very skilled technicians who know how to fix these machines and how to run the software and work with it, so forth. One example, multiply that by 100, multiply that by 1,000. That's the transformation. So all work involves a mixture of physical work and cognitive mental work and so on. But millions and tens of millions of jobs, not only in the United States, but then perhaps we're getting up to 1 billion jobs around the world where the value added of the employee is largely physical. I work with my hands and I've got some skills. In the next 10 to 20 years, that's all going to be transformed. What kind of workers who are working in those areas are still going to have the same jobs they have now? What will they be doing in 5, 10, 15 years? What do they need to be? If I'm someone, I don't want to be a nerd. I like working with my hands. I like machines and so forth. How are they going to think about themselves, their skill set, their careers in order to be able to function in this environment? And of course, the same thing happens on the more cognitive side of the equation. Minimal physicality, but a lot of thinking work that goes into, right? And then all of the new softwares and the algorithms and so forth that's coming along. And again, everybody is aware of this trend, but if I am a smart person, right, I'm a college-educated person, right, or I'm just a lone wolf who's off doing whatever, but I'm working with my brain and so on, what will my employment prospects be like over the next 5, 10, 15 years, given this projected development of artificial intelligence? So again, just in my career, secretaries, what has happened to secretaries? What is going to happen to all of those people? We live in a big world. We all need to talk to each other, who made a living as translators. People who made a living doing legal transcription for the millions of lawyers around the world. Every single medical procedure that is done, a doctor, surgeon making notes about what he or she did and having someone do all of those transcriptions. All of the insurance adjusters who will take an accident report claim, make a judgment about whether it's actionable or not actionable. Should it go in this pile? Should it go in that pile? When we have software that can do some semantic interpretation. This is the text. This is likely what it means, and do all of the sorting. So all of that white-collar work done by people who are using their brains in offices. Again, millions and millions of people. How are they going to need to think of their own human capital in order to survive and function in the oncoming world? Now, this is somewhat cutesy, but I like to think about it this way. Partly I started to think about this as a professor because I was thinking about my students, right? And partly we want them to graduate university with a degree. And yes, I want them to live a full, meaningful life, but I want them to get a job, and I want them to get a good job, right? So how can I make sure that when we certify them and say, yes, you are ready to go out there into the real world and make a go of your life, my education or my contribution to your education has been meaningful. And then I started to realize, as I was thinking about all of these other things that we were talking about here, big parts of that I have no idea. Because this is the thing, right? There are so many new jobs that are being created. And I don't have the expertise to have a clue what the vast majority of those new jobs are going to be. Exactly what cognitive skills, what physical skills they're going to need in order to be able to do that job. I don't know. And I think about placing my students with various companies that hire a lot, or at least certain categories of companies. I'm preparing you for this kind of industry. Those kind of companies won't exist anymore. And the kinds of companies that will exist, in many cases, don't yet exist. And I don't know how to imagine what those companies will be, so I can think in terms of, this is what my students need to know so they can go and work for that company. So they'll be doing things at companies that we have no clue for. And that's your situation as well. You're going to be working in 10 years, all of the statistics show, more than likely, right, doing things that you don't know right now you need to know how to do those things. And chances are very good you'll be working for companies that don't exist yet, or they will be in the very early stages of existing. So what kind of way of thinking and preparing yourself, what knowledge do you need? What mental habits do you need? What character traits do you need so that you can function and flourish in this economic environment? This is not, I was making a bit of a joke at lunch, my family history. I'm actually the first Hicks to, as far as we know, the first Hicks ever to go to college, because I come from a long line of farmers. So if we were to go back 200 years, and I'm a teenager or I'm 20 years old, young Stephen Hicks, what am I going to do? That question's already been answered for 15, 20 years. You're going to be a farmer, just like your dad, just like your grandfather. And then when you get old, right, you will have kids and you'll pass the farm on to them. So that's all stable. We know what skills, what knowledge, what character traits are necessary to be successful as a farmer. That doesn't change quite as much, but we're in a brand new world. So how do you do that? This is where the concept of being not necessarily an entrepreneur, although that's a huge option. The amount of entrepreneurial activity, new companies, new ideas starting up, that's also an upward trend. But even if you decide you're not going to be an entrepreneur per se, you're going to go work for someone else, chances are very good that you will be working in entrepreneurial companies. That is to say, companies that have been started by other people who are very entrepreneurial, and you'll be going into an entrepreneurial culture. And you'll be expected to function not necessarily as the whole shebang entrepreneur, but very entrepreneurially. They don't want someone who just sits and does mechanical desk work or mechanical work at the loading dock. All of that's been outsourced to the AI and to the robots. They want a certain kind of person to fit into their entrepreneurial culture. That's who you need to be. Now, this is a chart. It's now 11 years old, but it's timeless. This was a survey of senior HR people. These are people who hire a lot of people. As it turns out, this was done over the course of May and June, basically this time of year, which was the big hiring season. Because what happens all around the United States is there's all of the students who have just graduated and got their degrees that year, and they are out on the job market. And then, so there's just a huge interviewing mills that go on, and thousands of people get hired. So these are people who do this, and they go around to the universities. And the question basically is, what are you looking for when you're hiring the next generation of people out of the universities? And they just collect all of the data. And of course, well, we want the perfect employee. And what is the perfect employee that has 100 traits or whatever they are, right? We want someone who can do everything. But then we start to get serious. We say, well, you're not going to get the perfect employee who can do everything. What things really matter to you? And they broke that down into two categories here. Say, all of the skills that you think are desirable, which ones do you think really are essential? So, to take an example here, media literacy, what does that even mean? You can go on Google, you can find your way to the Wall Street Journal, you can find the stock prices, right? You can navigate the internet, you can read, you can do basic writing, okay, and so forth. Okay, that's, the answer is all taken kind of for granted. That's not that essential. Proficiency with new technologies. Well, that's more essential. Okay. What does proficiency with new technologies mean? Well, they say, well, we're going to upgrade the software on your computer and you don't freak out. I'm fine with that. Right? I can handle learning, right, some new variations, right? Or we have this new device that will enable you to do this. I don't even know what this device is. Right? We all have lots of these devices. Right? You're fine with saying, I'll take that and I'll play around with that and I will learn how to integrate that into my life and become proficient with it. Being organized, more essential. Oral communication. You can talk. And talk clearly, succinctly, get to the point, make yourself understood. Ability to work with others of diverse backgrounds, teamwork, etc. Okay, so this is the essential one. Then the other sorting thing was of all of the students and recent graduates, right, whom you are interviewing, how easy is it to find students who can do those things, have those skills? Right, and then they crunch all of those numbers and they find, well, it's pretty easy to find students who are organized. By the time you get through university, you got your degree, you kind of have to have your act together, at least at a basic level. So it's not difficult to find people who can do that. It's not actually difficult to find people who are willing to work with other races and religions and political beliefs and so forth. That's pretty easy. But as soon as we start getting a little more techie, a little bit harder. Serious tech skills. You saw Professor Klein and I wrestling with the machines, just trying to get a simple PowerPoint to work, okay? We're probably not quite there yet, right? But we're old guys right at this point. Writing, notice that, actually pretty easy to find people who can talk well, have a good conversation. Writing is a lot harder. And basically they're all saying, even university graduates can't write clearly, organizedly, compellingly. Of course, this is, make a note of this, right? If I want an immediate advantage in the in the job market, I will work on my writing skills. Because often, this is getting off track just a little bit, getting a job is not that hard. Keeping that job for more than 6 months is hard, because that first 6 months is such a huge sorting, right? So the students who can't compose an intelligible email, you find out about those people very quickly, bye-bye. And then on the basis of that. And at least from my experience, you will be surprised at how much writing you have to do. So, writing, creativity, that's an interesting one. Look at how few students have any measure of creativity, according to people who are doing serious hiring. Right, now we talk about, at least in North America and the modern world, right, be creative, be yourself, do your own thing. And even the United States internationally has a reputation for having all of these creative types doing all sorts of right? But that's still seemingly a small minority of the overall population. So you might have students who are basically okay with math, and if you show them a problem that they've seen before, or the kind of problem they've seen before, they can work that one out. Give them anything that's a little bit different or outside the box, don't know how to handle it. Very used to, what's the answer to this question? I just Google it, I can copy that answer down, or the teacher will tell me. Give me an open-ended problem for which there's not yet an answer at the back of the textbook. You could try this, you could try that, you could try this other thing. Very few students comfortable and able to do that. Creativity seemingly in short supply. But this upper right quadrant, I'm just going to focus on that one for 1 minute here, because that's where you look for both. According to the important HR people, what's both essential and really hard to find. And it's the only two things in that box. Right? Critical thinking and problem solving. So giving people a problem they have not seen before and ask them to solve the problem. Now, many, of course, will just say, well, that sounds like too much work. I want somebody else to solve the problem and just tell me what to do. Right, well, you're already sorted out from that. Or I'm willing to try. But to know how to look at a problem from different angles, to take it apart and put it together in different ways. Right? And to do all sorts of the playing and experimenting that goes into problem solving, and often sticking with it for a certain amount of time, that's rare. Okay? And that's a set of skills that need to be cultivated. And then critical thinking, right? Another big one. This is a bit of a term of art, but what it means is thinking about hard things. Not just thinking about easy things, but being willing to think about hard things, difficult things. Sometimes it involves thinking about things that are emotionally stressing. They push your buttons politically, religiously, culturally, personal values. Not shutting down. Right? Being able to say, all right, this is a hard thing to think about, but I need to think about it critically and come up with the judgment. Being able to do this not only on your own, but since we're talking a lot about how essential working with other people and teamwork is, a lot of this thinking critically takes place in a social context. So you're in a meeting with a bunch of other people, and you have to figure something out, and someone puts an idea out there. It's not just that you need to be able to think critically and evaluate about that and say that's a good solution to the problem in your own judgment, but suppose you don't think it's a very good idea. It's got some weaknesses. To be able to criticize someone else's idea. And why is that hard? Well, because our whole life, we know how so many people react to any sort of a criticism to their idea. They get defensive, they get angry, right? It descends into insult, and you hate each other for the rest of your lives. It's going back to like day one in our week here. So that's a very common problem, but many people have not learned how to give criticism. Now, of course, it's one thing to say, that's just an idiotic idea. What kind of bozo would ever come up with that idea? All right, that's not the right way to criticize. But to say, it's an interesting idea, I can see that it's got these three virtues, but did you think about this issue here? Because it seems like that might raise a problem for it. To raise the criticism in a somewhat benevolent context, such that the other person can process it. And then on the flip side of that, it's you put your ideas out there, right? A lot of people don't want to put the idea out there, right? Because they're afraid it will be criticized. But then to be able to do the critical thinking, which involves saying, I came up with this idea, and we all love the ideas that we've come up with all by ourselves, and we automatically think they're great. This is kind of a human predisposition. We put the idea out there, and someone criticizes your idea, your pet idea, your favorite idea in the whole world right now. How do you react? You shut down, you get defensive, right? You respond in various ways. Enormous set of critical thinking skills that are not only cognitive, but also in many cases involve certain social dynamics and being good at that. So the point of all of this then is to say, If this is the new, so to speak, revolutionary working environment that we are existing in, it's going to continue on, and you are entering into it. One way to think about an answer to that question: how do I prepare myself for jobs that I don't know I'm going to be doing, and at companies I don't know exist yet? I know I'm going to need those skills, whatever it is, and I am going to work on that. Not only because those are good skills to have, but they're also going to give me a huge competitive leg up in the market, because we know so many other students just won't have those skills. All right. Now that then is to say, not only in modern times more generally are we encouraging people to be more free, to be more individualistic, to do your own thing, then somewhat metaphorically to say, you really have to function as an entrepreneur in all of the areas of your life. No one's going to tell you what your, well, this is not quite true. I was going to say, no one's going to tell you what your religious beliefs should be. Of course, there's still lots of people who will do that, but culturally, bottom line is, we all know I have to take on this project of thinking through religious issues and making my own decisions and making my own commitments. No one's going to tell you whom you should date, who your friends should be. I have to be entrepreneurial and put myself out there and do lots of experimenting and make my own friendships, right? And make other relationships and make them work. I need to be entrepreneurial rather than the old idea of who your friends and who your marriage partners are going to be. It's all set by tradition and other people are making those choices basically for you. No, you are the entrepreneur in that area. Artistically, right? To put yourself out there and explore the world of music and maybe try making some of your own music and then putting together your own musical taste, your musical portfolio, and integrating that into your life. We don't all listen to the same music, and it's not, well, you know, like when I was growing up as a kid, this is the horror story, sitting in the back seat, my mom and dad are driving, and they're controlling the radio dial, right? And it's stuck on all of this terrible old-fashioned music, right? Fortunately, we've broken free from that, and we are all entrepreneurial and in control of our musical lives and so on. And then if we extend that to the business world, where we're more comfortable with using the idea of an entrepreneur, I think it works, right? You are the entrepreneur, and you need to cultivate the mindset of being an entrepreneur and the character set and the action set of being entrepreneurial in approaching your life and putting it all together. That's the modern world. Given the way the vast majority of human beings have existed for so long, that's a radically new idea. And in many cases, many of the social institutions, cultural institutions, even political institutions that have been in place for thousands and thousands of years resist that idea. But it's an idea that is on the way. So now what does it mean to be the entrepreneur of your life? So they say, okay, I need to be entrepreneurial. And we've got Carrie Ann earlier talk about the meaning of life, and there were a lot of things to think through there theoretically. What I want to do in this next section, though, is to say, suppose we are talking about entrepreneurship in the basic sense. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, or whoever the stereotypical actual business entrepreneur is for you. And describe more analytically the process that is involved in entrepreneurship from start to beginning. Where does it begin? Well, we always say someone comes up with an idea. That's where it begins. And usually the idea that someone gets excited about says, I think this is a new idea. No one's doing this yet. We know there's lots of people who will say, oh, right. Sometimes someone else acts on that idea, say, oh, I had that idea and it was pretty cool, right? So some new idea. And often it involves someone who's doing some research and thinking and tinkering in various ways, and they just come up with something that this could work. This could solve a problem. This could be a new way of doing something or other, but it's just in your idea space. And sometimes we describe entrepreneurial-minded people as people who are really creative, and they often come up with new business ideas on a fairly regular basis. We could do this, we could do that, we could do these various other things. All right, so that's a start. But of course, if it's just an idea, nothing happens. You have to actually be motivated to do something about it, because there are lots of people we know have ideas. It'd be kind of cool if this happened. Wouldn't it be nice if this happened or if that result happened? But even just my tone of voice right now, right? I'm never going to act on those ideas. It would be nice, right? So the idea, oh, no, I want to make something happen here. It matters to me that this happened. I'm excited about it, and I want it not just to be an idea. I want to see it real. I want to become rich. I think that could make me $1 million or whatever it is. So that energy that comes from ambition has to be there. If you ask many people why they did not become entrepreneurs, lots of people who had ideas, most of the time, what will they say? Why didn't you become an entrepreneur? You're too young to know this phenomenon. Right? But what holds people back? They've got a really good idea, and they really want to be rich, and they think it would be really cool if that idea got worked out, but they don't do it.
Sometimes they want the stability of their job.
Yes, okay, so I value stability. The paycheck comes in every week or every month. I have to cut that paycheck, right? I'm afraid. I feel some fear. There's an insecurity there. What if it doesn't work? What if I fail? Right? What if people laugh at me? Right? I've got $3,000 saved up. I could plow into this new business. What if I lose my life savings? Right? So fear. But if you know it's a good idea, and of course everybody's going to think, how do I give up the paycheck, right? What if I do fail? Right? That's not irrational. Actually, you have to, it's part of rationality to think about those possibilities of failure. But it's going to take what we call guts, right? You have to say, I'm going to do it anyways, even though I am aware of these fears. So I have to have an idea. I have to be ambitious about that idea. I have to have the guts to make it trend. So then I have to, so to speak, get off the sofa, show some initiative, and start doing various things. Great. Whatever the initiatives are. And obviously there's lots of things you have to start doing, but actually getting started. Anybody who does any writing, of course you've all done college essays, what's the hardest thing to do in writing? Starting. That's right.
It's actually called blank page thing.
Well, a lot of writers don't even get to the point where the blank page is in front of them, right? Because they're off doing other things, right? Avoidance. Sorry? Yes, well, so, and then we have lots of tricks in order to be able to get ourselves just to do the start. Or there's an old aphorism that says, the person who started the job is half done. That's at least psychologically real. Okay? Right? And so actually taking the initiative, actually getting started. Right? And we know a lot of people don't ever quite get started. Now then, most entrepreneurial success, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of hard work. There was a lot of frustrations along the way. There are a lot of self-doubts that happen along the way. There are a lot of people who just give up. They quit. And often they quit rather early. So the successful entrepreneurial person is going to be one who perseveres through all of that. Most of the time, your idea, even if it's a very good idea, is not a perfect idea. You kind of sort of have an area or an idea. And you try it out. And it fails. So you make some adjustments. And you try something else and it sort of works. And you make some adjustments and it sort of works. And you get the feedback from your test market, from your beta tester people, right, and so forth. There's a lot of that, and you have to be open to it. The contrast, again, is going to be someone who says, oh, this is my idea. The idea is not going to change. It's going to be this and only this. Resist any feedback from other people, in many cases even resisting feedback from their own eyes if it's apparent, and it should be apparent to them that it's not actually a very good idea. This seems to be an essential part of the process, particularly anything complicated and new. A lot of this has to happen. There's a stage then, I'm going to call it the productivity stage, right, where you've gone through all of this, you actually finish the project. And you're committed to bringing it to completion and putting it out the door. Now, this is a true confessions here thing for me as a writer. I have published a lot of stuff over my career, but of all the stuff that I have published, I easily have 20 times as much stuff not yet done. And this is interesting. Actually, I sit down and I write on it, right? And I get it 30%, 40%, 80% done, 90% done. If I just put one more week of work in on this, I would have a publishable article, right? And I could get it out there. But my personal problem is by that point, I've solved the problem to my own satisfaction, usually. I know what I think about this issue, right? I don't want to do all of that adding the footnotes nonsense, right? And proofreading, right? Hate that stuff. Actually sitting down and writing the email, dear editor, would you please consider this for publication? It's just, no, I'm not interested in that. And then some new exciting thing has come along, so I just start working on that. But that's a failure ultimately of productivity because that's not yet a working product, whatever the essay is or whatever the book is. Seeing it through to completion at the high level, getting it out the door. Leadership. Now, I'm going to put this one in here in an entrepreneurial context because almost always, if you're an entrepreneur or you're doing something new, you're going first. You're going down some sort of a new path. If it's a new kind of product, you have to convince customers or potential customers that this is in fact going to add value to their life. Right? Come over here. Let me show you, right, what can be done. Right? So I'm leading you to do something here. So Steve Jobs and the Apple people are very, when you read their reflections on it, they say, yeah, a big part of it is we know that these new devices and so forth are going to be great for the people, but the people don't, the consumers don't yet know that they need this. So we need to show them the value of this, make it real to them so that they are willing to follow us down this technological journey and integrate it into their life. If you're not going to be a solo operator, you're doing anything of moderate complexity, there's a division of labor. If you're the entrepreneur, you also have to lead your new people. You have to hire new people, show them what the product is, what the value is, how to do it. And so you need leadership in both of those components. And then the next step is you put it out there, and hopefully you're putting it out there with some measure of pride. This is a really valuable thing. I'm really proud of this. I've got it out there. Someone then buys it and they give you something of value in return and money. Although most people who are entrepreneurial and it really their work life more generally matters to them, they do of course love the money that comes in, but they love seeing other people using their products. Where I had 2 years off between undergraduate school and graduate school, I worked in construction to make some money because I was broke again. And but I was working as part of a construction crew, and there was a guy who was the foreman, and so he was driving the truck at the end of the day, and we always we were just wanting to get home, the rest of us, but he would take these detours to drive by homes that he had built before, right? Really nice houses. And he just got the biggest kick out of, seeing kids playing in the yard and seeing what people had done. He was so proud of his work. So yeah, I added great value, but I'm getting this psychological value in return, right? Seeing other people get value from my value and so on. That's an enormously important value in there. And then finally, right, all the stuff that Carrie Ann was talking about, Richard and Bill in various elements as way. Your ultimate goal is the success, but also being, as Professor Klein was putting it, being able to enjoy your success. Not as this is done, I'm just on to the next thing and euphoric. I get the psychological value, the physical value from it, and my life then is flourishing. Okay, now this is all meant to be a semi-analytic description of the entrepreneurial process, from the initial idea through all of the middle stuff to the final, we have a successful business up and running. It's flourishing. There's the list. And we are academics. It goes into a table. Here's the table. So I'm calling this table Entrepreneur Success Trait, and it's exactly a duplicate of that. Now I want to get all philosophical, connect to Carrie Ann's talk. Some of the themes come from Richard and from Bill as well, and Rand is coming up in a little bit as well. These are success traits of entrepreneurs. If we start using philosophy language, what do we call a person who is committed to the acquisition of knowledge and creatively playing around with ideas to come up with new ideas? They're very good at the logic and perhaps the statistics and the various methods of analyzing experimental data. I'm going to suggest this is rationality. So that then is to say, what we call being a knowledgeable person presupposes that you've done a lot of reading and thinking and experiencing and acquired a lot of knowledge, the exercise of your rational capacity. Once you are good at that, and along the way you're being willing to play around with the items of knowledge and so forth that you're acquiring along the way, and you're developing more sophisticated methods of doing that, sometimes even formal methods, your creativity is enhanced. So our rational capacity, the more we develop it, or the more knowledge and creativity we are going to be possible. So rationality, number one. What do we call someone who is ambitious? And I want to suggest pride is the word here. Now, Rand actually describes pride as moral ambitiousness, if you read her writings. Right? A proud person is someone who is committed to being morally the best person they can be. Right? By contrast, at least the old-fashioned use of the word humble, someone is humble, is someone who's, well, I'm nothing special, I'll never amount to much. Kind of a self-humility, right, attitude. But a proud person, I'm proud of who I am. And part of what I'm proud of is I want to be the best that I can be. And I'm going to work toward being the best that I can be. Sometimes we talk about, in other contexts, taking pride in your appearance. What does that mean? Right? Well, being ambitious. Right? I want to look the best that I can. I'm going out on a date, or I'm going first day on the job, right? Whatever it is. My ambition is to take pride in my appearance. All right, so the ambitious person is proud, not only in that these are my accomplishments, but in that future-oriented. I want to make it the best that I can, whatever it is. Initiative, I want to make a connection to integrity. Because there is a kind of integration that comes into it. I have a good idea in my head. I want to see it real in practice. It's not that I think things are good in my head, and it doesn't really matter what happens out there. I think that something is true. I will speak that truth. And I will resist attacks on something that I think is true. That's a person of integrity. Instead of someone says, I think this is true, but I say something else. That's a disintegration between what they think and what they say. Right? Or I am believing certain things about health and nutrition, but I only eat junk food. That's a disintegration. The person who really has integrity in that particular domain thinks certain things are true and important with respect to health, and integrates that into their action and their behavior. So the person who is consistently committed to, I have good ideas, I want to make them real, I want to see them happen in my practice. That's an application of integrity. Guts, the big word in the philosophy literature is courage. Courage doesn't mean being fearless. It means you have fears, and most of your fears are going to be rational fears. The fear of people laughing at you, you making mistakes, having to admit, I made a mistake. It's really hard to say, I made a mistake, I was wrong. It takes guts, courage to be able to do so. To be able to say, I think something is right, and I fear other people's disapproval, but I still am going to do that. To raise my hand in class and ask a question, to public speak, right? All of these things, face your fears in the right context and act on them, that takes courage. So courage. Perseverance. I'm going to make a connection here to independence in the following sense. Often when people fail at perseverance, I get a little bit tired, and so I stop. Well, we're all going to get a little bit tired, right, at various points, but not to let that momentary feeling of tiredness interfere with your independent judgment that you have made. I need to get this thing done now. Or someone else says, seeing you working hard on something, and you say, I need to finish this. And they say, no, come on, let's go party. Let's go do whatever. Right, that's going to happen. That's perfectly fine. But not letting their judgment about what you should be doing, right, override your independent judgment about what you should be doing right now. It's you. And so forth. Experience-based adjustments. I want to make a connection to honesty, because honesty is absolutely important in this case here. You make an experiment, something doesn't fit, something doesn't go wrong. It's very easy to deceive yourself a little bit, just to ignore that, ignore the outlier. To the extent that you are committed to the facts, I'm honest, no, that does not fit with my idea. My prototype that I really hope is going to work just isn't quite there yet. That's the way it is. And so I then need to rethink, re-experiment, try something else until I see that for sure and in fact it is working. Never letting yourself be deceived on these things. Productivity, just elevated that as a commitment to productiveness. Leadership, we don't really have a concept here, so I'm just going to make one up. Leadershipness, right? Actually, there are whole literatures on leadership, because this is obviously very complex, right? Set of skills and character traits and social skills and so forth. Trade value for value. I make a connection to justice. Right? This is largely what Professor Salzman was talking about yesterday. When we go into a market, I'm not asking you for charity. You're not trying to steal from me. Right? I'm bringing value. You have value. We work out a deal that's mutually beneficial. We are respecting each other as mutually trading, mutually benefiting individuals. We shake hands. We exchange the money. We say, thank you, right? Right? That's justice in this commercial space. And then experience and enjoying success. Right? I want to make a connection to self-esteem. I did that. I feel better about myself. I've been successful in my career. I've made the world a better place. I'm esteemed. And I know that it came from me. Of course, I've got other people on my team. They also deserve the esteem as well, but I am for real. I have made it happen. Now, this is an interesting one. I don't want to just throw it away. There's a huge literature on this, and this is very difficult for some people to know how to really enjoy their success. I'll just give a couple of examples in passing, but one does involve women more often than it does with men, and even younger women who are smart. They're hardworking. They've graduated from college. They've gotten their degree. They've gotten a good job, and now they are, by any objective measure, successful in their careers. But they will say they feel like an imposter. I don't really deserve this. And there's there's a large enough subsection here that there's a name for it. It's called the imposter syndrome, where you are in fact successful, but you have not integrated your self-assessment objectively. There's something else that makes you feel like you don't, and that of course is going to undercut your ability to enjoy any of the successes that you have achieved. This is a real phenomenon. Another one is You've been very productive, say here, but much of production is for the purpose of consumption. It's not only psychological consumption, but knowing how to spend your money well in a way that actually adds value to your life. The other anecdote I'm thinking about here is a little bit indirect. It's a story from my brother, who had a friend, and my brother and I, he's great, but he doesn't understand my job because I like to work inside and read books and write stuff and so forth. And he's a Canadian stereotypical, out in the woods, hunting and fishing, driving a big old pickup truck, right, kind of guy. And he's been kind of successful in there, put together a life for him. So he would much rather be working outside in the Canadian winter, right, than having an inside office job. Yeah, so different strokes for different folks, and that's just the kind of guy he is. But he has a lot of buddies from that work environment and from his childhood friends. One of his friends, though, he told me this story, was a guy whom they grew up, and he worked with this guy, and he also was a hunting, fishing, pickup truck driving, beer drinking, good old Canadian guy. But then he made serious money, and he kind of dropped off the radar, they said, for about 6 months. And the next time they saw him, he was driving a Cadillac sedan, not a pickup truck. He wasn't drinking beer anymore. He was drinking wine. Right? He wasn't wearing, flannel and blue jeans and baseball hat. He was wearing some sort of casual summer suit, right, or whatever. So it was still the same guy, but he had dramatically altered his lifestyle as a result of his financial success. But apparently he wasn't very happy, right? He didn't actually like wine that much. He liked beer, right? He didn't like wearing ties or even suits, right? He was a certain kind of guy. And the Cadillac was very comfortable. Apparently the guy's wife really liked the Cadillac more than the pickup truck, but he missed his pickup truck. So, point is, even though he's been very successful and he's got all of this really nice stuff, he's not being a savvy consumer with respect to his own life and learning how to spend your wealth, including your time wealth, on things that actually are going to esteem yourself and enhance yourself. That is a challenge. Now, go ahead, Carrie Ann.
I'm going to go to to see if we can improve a little on the leadership in this.
Yes, open to suggestions.
I don't know that I have one new word, and I know it's really crucial to have a one word for concept. Something that combines independence with courage. If there's some particular word that combines those two concepts together, because a leader is somebody who's willing to go right down a new path.
Yes.
And be the first one, perhaps. And so that takes an independence of mind. And it also takes courage because you don't know what you're going to find. It's around the next bend. And no matter what your fears are about the direction they're going into, which is kind of uncharted water,
Yeah.
you still have the courage. So out of the other moral virtues, it seems that leadership essentially involves some combination of independence and courage, most centrally.
Yeah. I think you're right, because in one sense, this is not the only way to array all of these traits, but there is I kind of put them on a timeline. So you don't really get to line 4 until you've already gone through line 3. So your point, I think, would then say you don't get to the leadership stage until you've already done your own courage and independence, right, and so on. So I think that might be a part of it. I think it leaves open yet still the social aspects of it. So how you communicate that to potential customers and to people you're working with as employees. But even just to take the uncertainty element, that's interesting, because one of the things that is characteristic of leaders, and this is partly a moral virtue trait, but also partly a psychological trait, is being able to handle the uncertainty. And this ties into the Frank Knight, right, sort of stuff. So in many cases, leaders will be the kind of people who, as you say, well, we're going in this direction, everybody follow me, and maybe I've got some charisma and track record, I'm paying your check, so you're going to follow me anyway. So I am the leader and you are following me. And where are we going? And how do I answer that question? Because in many cases, I only have a general terrain. And if I say we're kind of going over in that direction, for the vast majority of people we're working for, that sounds not clear enough. I need to know where we are going, right? Much more specifically. So I'm comfortable with saying this is the right general direction for us to go, but many people I'm working for whom I need to motivate need something much more specific. And so leaders might say, well, you see that range of 4 hills over there across the meadow, right? That second hill over there, that's where we're going. Look at that hill, right? And that's something very concrete. And then other people, oh, okay, now I know where we're going. We're going to that hill. But in my mind, I don't know that it's the second hill. So I've lied a little bit, right? Or I've made over precise knowingly, right, where we are going. But nonetheless, that's an important part of managing the uncertainty, not only for me, but in a social context where people have different risk tolerances, uncertainty, comfort levels, and so forth. So let's leave this as a working project right there. Okay, absolutely. Okay. Now, one thing I want to emphasize is how new all of this is in human history, and this way of packaging what it takes to be successful in business, but also in life. To say that this would leave us, so to speak, as a laundry list of things to work on. I need to cultivate my rationality and then stock it with huge amounts of knowledge, but all of those thinking methods, math as a tool, something about scientific methods, something about system thinking, something about right this, that, and the other thing. So it's all going to go into the mental hopper that's going to make me a much more powerful thinking. I need to work, say, on my courage. Well, how do I do that? How do I become a more courageous person? Or if I'm a parent raising a child, right, or I'm a teacher, and we can't just necessarily say, well, just puff out your chest and be more courageous. Right? Like all of the knowledge that you have to build up, it takes time, it takes practice, it takes effort. It's the same thing. So you might then say, well, I don't know, when you're 3 years old and your mom takes you to the park and helps you climb the steps up to the slide, right? There's you're 3 years old, and what are you looking at? That's way down there, right? And you feel fear. You realize that you know what it's like to fall down and hurt yourself. Okay? But your mother is benevolently helping you, and she guides you, and you learn to let go and go down the slide. And then maybe a couple years later, you're learning to ride a bike. Can we all remember this experience? Right? Or you're up on the bike, and again know what it's like to fall down on stuff, and this thing is unstable. And I remember teaching my 2 kids to ride a bike. I'm behind them. They're both scared, right? And I'm holding the thing stable and saying encouraging words to them, but they have to at some point screw up the courage and say, okay, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to push on the pedals and let go, Daddy. That's courage, but that's a small thing. Going down a slide. You're in class and you have a question for the teacher, and you're surrounded by your fellow students, and you know how mean those other kids can be. But you're going to raise your hand and ask a question. That's an act of courage. So for ourselves, obviously we're not little kids anymore, but we have to think about those thousands or dozens of examples, and then the same thing in our own lives, right? What things do I know I need to be able to do to be successful in life or in my business career? But right now, those things give me the willies, right? I don't like deal. Maybe it's public speaking, maybe it's whatever. But make a list and work on it as well. And then same things with respect to other things. Leadership, we can start unpacking all of that. What are the components that go into leadership, and seeing yourself as a work in progress? An analogy often is to the sports world, and a lot of educators are attracted to the idea of sports not merely as fun, but as a training for teamwork, for physical skills, for courage, for commitment, for perseverance, for you're losing, but psychologically you know how to regroup and come back, for being a leader, but also knowing how to be a follower, right, on team. So what they do obviously in the sports world is they break all of those components down into parts, and they work on those parts separately. So perhaps see this as a list, break it down into parts, and work on each of them. This, though, is to say you want to live the best possible kind of life, and being entrepreneurial is a good lens for thinking about that. That then becomes a kind of code of morality or code of ethics to work for. And to go back to the point about why this is new and why it's importantly new and why the whole philosophy that works with all of this is also important, I want to contrast this set of traits with the traits that are valorized in the major moral traditions, not only in the West, but also significantly in the East around the world. So these are the moral codes or ways of thinking about living the best life that have dominated human experience for thousands and thousands of years. I'm going to essentialize things, but the concepts that emerge to the top, and I've got them color-coded here, is to say the best kind of life is the life of conquest. Life is about power, dominion, rising to the top, and making sure you are the guy at the top who has the power to do whatever it is that you want. Or the best kind of life is characterized by these concepts here. You're born into a place, you have duties. They are assigned to you, your rules, what you are supposed to do. Be a good little boy, be a good little girl. Here are the rules, don't break the rules, follow the rules. You have obligations. It doesn't really matter so much what you want. Be willing to set that aside to do what you are supposed to do, sacrifice. Now, let me put some pictures to this. 1,000 years ago in human history, literally 1,000 years ago, this is one of the top guys in the West. This is one of the top guys in the East. You want to be the best man possible? From day one, what do? Well, you learn self-discipline, but you learn how to kill other people and take their stuff and then rise up in the aristocracy, perhaps yourself becoming the king. How do the kings become kings? Either your dad was the king and you inherited it, but then how did your dad become the king? Because he, killed and robbed, right? Or he killed the earlier king, or we conquered this king and we killed him and took his stuff, and now I'm the king. That's the model. That's the most successful life. And then, in Eastern versions, it's exactly the same sort of thing. There's nothing here about justice. What are you talking about? Creative rationality. Well, there's obviously some initiative, right? You have to actually go out there, and there's a lot of physical training and martial training and so on, but it is the martial ideal. This goes back to Mars, the god of war. And you build your entire moral code, your self-worth, and your place in the social hierarchy around that model, dominating for thousands and thousands of years. And we still, to some extent, inherit that. Right? We recognize this code. Now, the opposite code, though, has been to say, if you want to be the best kind of person, the ideal man, the ideal human being, there's a female version of this, of course, you renounce power, you renounce worldly ambition, you renounce any domination. You become as selfless as you possibly can. I'm not going to stand proud. Instead, I fall on my knees to lower myself. Maybe I lay on the ground and I press my face into the dirt. That's how low I am. I am completely pacific. And I'm looking to the beyond. And I hope, right, that the God or the gods will make my life meaningful. It's not me. It's not my project. Again, Eastern versions and Western versions. at least in the Western tradition, the longest of the Western traditions, if you become a monk in the Catholic tradition, there's like a ceremony you go through. It's a formal vows, and it's analogous to a marriage, right, where you do wedding vows. And you think about the people who are getting married, they craft their vows, and they choose the things that are the most important to them, what this relationship means, and you put them into your vows. And you make a very solemn declaration. That's what you're going to dedicate yourself in this marriage. By analogy, you are marrying the church, or you are marrying God. Right? What are this is going to be a good international test, so you can't say anything quite yet. What are the 3 vows, and you too, since you're Western culture, for priests? And it's actually the same ones for monks and for nuns. You want to be the best kind of person you be, you have to vow these 3 things. What are they? Any guesses?
Has to be.
Not you.
Obedience.
Okay, all right. There's no shutting these guys up, apparently. That's 2 of them. All right, so obedience is one of them. You will have no will of your own. You will obey orders. You will obey commands. No liberty, no experimental freedom. Do your own thing. Obey. Richard, I was just going to say that one for last because it's chastity. That is to say, no sex. That's much too self-indulgent, too much happiness, too much pleasure in that area. Life is not about your happiness, your pleasure. Poverty is usually the first one. Poverty. Not interested in material goods, not interested in money, not interested in anything that money can buy. That's the ideal human being. As poor as you can be, as obedient as you can be, as chaste as you can be. And again, for centuries and millennia, that is upheld as the great highest ideal human beings can strive to. And we, to a large extent, still inherit that tradition. So what we have is clearly revolutionary times. But in this revolutionary times, it's not a monoculture. Right? We inherit the older martial tradition. It's all about power and dominance and assertion and so forth. I don't want to make anything. I want other people to make it and take it from them. And to the extent that I am successful at doing so, I'm living my best life. Or I have to totally renounce all of that in order to be a good person and live the smallest possible life that I can. Take up as little space in the universe, think as little of myself as I possibly can. That's to live the best possible life. So I start talking about entrepreneurs, right, and being creative and ambitious and just and being, whoever your entrepreneurial heroes are. That's very new, and there's at least a 3-way huge battle going on in the intellectual, moral, cultural space over that. So, if we're supposed to choose between those 2, I wanted to drill down just on one subset here. It's a very interesting thing. This is the business ethics connection and the political economy question. You think about the attitudes of these 2 codes with respect to wealth, money, and economic activity. Common to both of them historically, again, thousands of years, is the idea that people who work for a living are low. Sometimes they might be really low. Sometimes they might go below the bar of just neutral moral status and into negative moral status. So if I'm a warrior, do I want to work for a living? Do I think about creating value in the world? No, that's what the peasants do. And then I tax them to support my higher non-working lifestyle. My wife, she's an aristocratic lady. Does she work? Absolutely not. Right? The idea that she would ever do anything not only for herself or to produce anything that would be traded in the market, again, that's what the peasants do. So you are defined, your status in society, by not being part of the working classes. You see this even fascinatingly. This is not going to connect with you, but there are so many movies that are set in Britain during the Industrial Revolution and the subsequent century of people who came from aristocratic minor nobility families, but they were in reduced circumstances. And they burned up all of their inheritance, and the firstborn son, is that mine? I apologize.
No, see, it's true.
Let me shut it off. I wish. Yeah. So I was just going back to the theme of this this movie. So we didn't have to work. We were lords and ladies or gentlemen of leisure, right, and so forth. And now our firstborn son has to become a lawyer or a doctor, and it's so embarrassing. It's so shameful, right, that we are reduced to having to work for a living. In Eastern traditions, it's taken to exaggerated form with women. The idea that I also have to even do the kind of work that involves walking from one place to another to show that I don't need to walk on my own effort, that I have enough servants to carry me around. What's the practice that I'm trying to get to here? The foot binding, right? So from an early age, right, the girls' feet are bound to the point where they cannot even walk on their own feet anymore. And that is a high social status, not working. So instead, work for the lower classes, for the lower orders. They support us in our more elevated lifestyle. The monk code, though, how do monks support themselves? Well, when they have to, of course, they might have a little monastic garden, but by and large, implication is our job is to pray for the health of society, for the goodness of society, to pray for everyone's souls. We're not supposed to be work. That's physical activity. We are soul people. We are spiritual people. And you guys do all of the work and give us alms. You give us charity, and we live off of your charity. But what's common then to both of them is the idea that working, creating value in the material world, a marketplace, lending money, charging interest, doing all this entrepreneurial stuff, completely alien to both of those long-standing historical traditions. So by contrast, if we think about who the heroes are, I mean, how many top military people, we don't even really hear about them very much, right? How many top religious people, right? Instead, the really popular people and the people who everybody's names are known. Elon, who's this guy in the upper right? That's Shaquille O'Neal. So you're right, he worked on himself, had a great basketball career, took his money, he was a smart guy, invested in all sorts of things, right? So he's grown his wealth in the entrepreneurial sector. That's a great role model, right, for young people. This woman here, anyone know? Heidi Klum, right, a German-American. She's an American now. She was a supermodel, but again, a smart supermodel. When her youth passed, she took her earnings and then invested in fashion, beauty, and related industries as well, and has become an amazingly successful entrepreneur. We're talking about Shark Tank, right? Very popular TV show where we enjoy hearing new business ideas and who's going to get the money, right, and so forth. So this is our culture right now. It's a much more entrepreneur celebrating culture. All right, so I know we're almost out of time here, so I always try to take long lists and boil them down. This is an attempt at that. These are our top values, top virtues. So be entrepreneurial. Integrate that with all of the theory that we've heard during the rest of the week and take it out. There's the, I put the word awesomeness on there just because I've had this, the words in the Declaration of Independence, right? The life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I've often thought it would be wonderful to have a column or a blog website called Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Awesomeness. So that's where that's coming from. So at least it made it onto a slide. Okay. All right, let's stop there.